The first time I saw my own death certificate, I was standing in a records office with a cup of coffee in my hand. I remember because the coffee was still hot. I remember because the clerk kept apologizing. And I remember because, according to the document she had just placed in front of me, I had been dead for 11 months. I stared at the paper, then at her, then back at the paper. "There's been a mistake," I said. The clerk swallowed. "I was hoping you were going to say that." She slid the certificate closer. My full name was printed across the top. My date of birth was correct. My social security number was correct. Even my middle name, which people had been misspelling for 40 years, was spelled correctly. And underneath all of it was one simple fact that made no sense. Date of death, October 14th. I was sitting in that office in September. Alive. Breathing. Holding a warm coffee. Looking at the paper that said I wasn't. I didn't know it yet, but somebody hadn't simply declared me dead. Somebody had needed me dead. And by the time I understood why, the people responsible had already started dividing up the life I'd spent 38 years building. You're watching Father's Hidden Reckoning, where we tell stories about family, betrayal, consequences, and the moments when people finally discover what they are worth. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from today. And one quick note. This is a fictionalized story created for entertainment. The names, people, and events are dramatized, and any resemblance to real individuals or events is coincidental. Now let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 56 years old. At least, that's what I had always believed. For most of my adult life, I thought I'd built a fairly ordinary life. I married my wife, Elaine, when I was 24. We had 2 children. Our daughter, Natalie, was 31. Our son, Eric, was 28. I worked in commercial construction for most of my life, starting as a laborer and eventually becoming a project manager, and then a partner in a small contracting company. I wasn't rich. Not the kind of rich where you buy houses just to knock them down. But I was comfortable. We had a modest house outside Columbus, Ohio. 2 cars. A workshop behind the garage. A retirement account I had contributed to religiously since I was 27. And one small lake property that my father had left me. That cabin mattered more to me than anything else I owned. Not because it was valuable. It wasn't. The roof needed replacing. The dock leaned slightly to one side. The kitchen cabinets were from a different century. But my father had taught me to fish there. He taught me how to split firewood there. He'd sat beside me on the porch the summer before he died and told me something I didn't understand until years later. He said, "A man can lose every dollar he owns and still start over." Then he looked toward the lake. But once you let someone convince you that you don't deserve your own life, that's harder to rebuild. At the time, I laughed. I thought he was being philosophical. I didn't know he was warning me. My life changed slowly after Elaine died. She had been gone for 4 years when this story began. Cancer. There was no dramatic miracle at the end. No last-minute cure. Just hospital rooms, medication schedules, paperwork, sleepless nights, and the quiet transformation that happens when the person you love becomes a series of appointments. After she was gone, the house became too quiet. I kept her coffee mug on the second shelf of the kitchen cabinet. Blue. A tiny crack near the handle. Natalie hated that mug. She used to tell her mother it looked like something you'd find at a yard sale. Elaine always laughed. So I kept it. I never moved it. My father's workbench was still in the corner. I hadn't touched the bottom drawer in years. It was jammed. I pulled harder. The drawer came loose with a wooden crack. Inside were old screws, fishing hooks, receipts, a rusted pocket knife, and a small brass key. I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the key had a number stamped into it. 214. I stared at it. I had no idea what it opened, but something about the number bothered me. 214. Inside were files. Old contracts. Bank statements. Property records. Photographs. And one envelope with my name on it. Not typed. Written by my father. I opened it. The letter inside was dated 6 months before his death. Daniel. If you're reading this, something has gone badly wrong. I need you to understand something I never told you because I thought keeping you out of it would protect you. It didn't. Jared did not simply leave the company. He was forced out. Your mother knew why. So did Elaine. The problem was not the money. It was the land. I stopped reading. The land. I went through the documents. Years earlier, my father and Jared had acquired several parcels outside the city. Most were eventually sold. One wasn't. A large tract of undeveloped property near what had become a major commercial corridor. At the time, it had been worth almost nothing. Now it was worth millions. And according to the documents in front of me, part of that land belonged to me. Not my company. Not my children. Me. The original agreement had been structured through a holding trust. My father had placed my share there decades earlier. The recent documents I'd seen were attempts to transfer control, but the transfer required my signature. And apparently, if I were declared dead, the process would become much easier. I kept turning pages. Then I found a second letter. This one was from Elaine. My wife's handwriting. I had seen it thousands of times. The first words were enough to make me sit down. Daniel, I'm sorry. I kept reading. She explained that several months before her death, she had discovered Jared was attempting to regain control of the property. She had confronted him. He threatened her. Not physically. Worse. He told her that if she interfered, the family would lose everything. She became afraid. She told my father. He began collecting evidence. And somewhere along the way, Natalie and Eric became involved. I stopped reading. I couldn't breathe properly. My children? No. I read the next page. Elaine had written that Jared convinced Natalie and Eric that I was going to sell everything and leave them with nothing. He showed them documents, financial projections, legal papers, edited messages. He told them their father had become unstable after Elaine's death. He told them I was planning to disinherit them, and then he offered them a solution. He would help them protect the family assets. That was the lie. Natalie and Eric didn't initially know about the death certificate. They thought they were helping establish legal control over my assets before I destroyed them. But the deeper I read, the more complicated it became. They had allowed Jared access to documents. They had participated in meetings, and eventually, they learned enough to realize what was happening. By then, it was too late. Jared had evidence against them. He could make them look like participants. He controlled the documents. He controlled the story. And now he needed me gone. I put the letter down. For years, I had imagined my children making a terrible decision because of greed. That explanation would have been easier. Greed is simple. Fear isn't. Fear makes ordinary people do things they would never recognize themselves doing. But understanding their fear did not erase what they had done. I reached the final page. Elaine had written one sentence that broke something inside me. If they ever betray you, Daniel, don't let them convince you that loving them means surrendering yourself. I folded the letter. That was the moment I stopped trying to save my family from consequences. I started trying to save the truth. The next morning, I called the first person I should have called weeks earlier. Martin, I need a lawyer, I said. He was quiet. I know someone. Not someone connected to you. I know. Someone independent. I have a name. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from attorney Rachel Donovan. She was in her 40s. Calm. Direct. She didn't react dramatically when I showed her the death certificate. She simply read it twice. Then she looked at me. You're certain you didn't authorize this? I'd remember authorizing my own death. She almost smiled. Fair point. I handed her the documents from my father's box. She read everything. The letters. The property records. The trust documents. The copied signature. She asked questions for nearly 3 hours. Some of them were uncomfortable. Do your children have access to your financial accounts? Some. Keys to the house? Yes. Passwords? Some. Could either of them have accessed your personal records? I stared at the table. Yes. Rachel nodded. Then she said something I didn't expect. Mr. Mercer, I don't think the most important question is whether your children helped create the false death record. I looked up. What is? Why they thought they needed to. She pointed to the property documents. If this land is what I think it is, someone has been planning around your death for a long time. I asked her how we proved it. She closed the folder. We don't accuse anyone. Then what do? We verify everything. And that's what we did. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a collection of quiet actions. Rachel requested certified records. Martin reviewed every financial change. We contacted the physician whose name appeared on the death certificate. Dr. Samuel Reed was horrified. He hadn't signed anything. Someone had forged his credentials. His office had also been breached months earlier. We obtained copies of old access logs. We found emails. One email had been sent from an account belonging to Jared Collins. It contained a list of dates, meetings, property filings, bank transfers, and beside my name was a single word, deceased. Except the date beside, it was 3 months before the official date on my death certificate. That changed everything. It meant the plan had existed before the paperwork. Rachel also discovered something else. The death certificate had been entered into a chain of records that would eventually trigger the transfer of several assets. Not immediately. There was a waiting process. Someone had designed the sequence carefully, and there was a final meeting scheduled. October 20th. 6 days away. The meeting would finalize control of the land. That was the false victory Jared believed he was about to enjoy. He thought I was dead. He thought my children were under his control. He thought the paperwork was complete. He thought the property was almost his. He was wrong. But Rachel insisted we do nothing dramatic. We let him continue, she said. He's still here. He's trying to steal my life. I know. And we're going to sit here? No. She closed the folder. We're going to let him finish showing us what he intended to do. That was harder than any confrontation. I wanted to call Natalie. I wanted to call Eric. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to hear them say they were sorry. But Rachel told me not yet. So I stayed quiet. On October 17th, Natalie came to my house. She looked exhausted. She stood at the front door without coming inside. Dad, I said nothing. She looked at me, then looked away. I need to tell you something. Come in. She stepped inside. Her eyes landed on her mother's blue mug. She stared at it for a few seconds. You still keep that there? Yes. She nodded. I used to think that was strange. I didn't answer. She sat down. I was wrong. I waited. I thought you were hiding things from us. Who told you that? Jared. Her voice cracked slightly. What? Because he showed me things. What things? Financial reports, emails, documents. Were they real? She shook her head. Some were. That answer hurt more than if she'd said no. Dad, I thought you were going to sell everything. I wasn't. I know that now. Then why didn't you ask me? She looked down. Because he made us believe you wouldn't tell us the truth. I sat across from her. What happened to your trust in me, Natalie? She didn't answer. I asked again. What happened? She began crying. I don't know. That was the first honest thing she'd said to me in months. I didn't move toward her. Not because I didn't love her. Because I was afraid that forgiving her too quickly would become another way of abandoning myself. She wiped her face. There was a meeting on the 20th. I know. Her eyes widened. You know? Yes. She stared at me. Dad, you shouldn't be here. I know. No, you don't understand. Then explain it. She lowered her voice. Jared told us there would be people there to finalize everything. What everything? The property. And what were you supposed to do? She hesitated. Sign. I leaned back. Did Eric know? Yes. Did both of you know about the death certificate? She looked at the floor. No. That answer surprised me. How did you find out? We didn't. Then why did you come here tonight? She looked at me through tears. Because Eric found something. What? He found the original transfer agreement. My heart stopped. Where? With Jared. Natalie reached in her purse. She pulled out a flash drive. We copied it. I took it. What? She swallowed. Because we finally realized he wasn't protecting us. She looked at me. He was getting rid of you. I held the flash drive in my hand. For the first time in months, I saw my daughter not as the person who had betrayed me, but as the frightened woman who had finally understood what she'd helped create. But understanding wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Where is Eric? At Jared's office. My stomach tightened. What? He thinks he can get the original files. I stood. Call him. I already did. And he isn't answering. That was when we heard a car door slam outside. I went to the window. Eric was standing in the driveway. He looked pale. And he wasn't alone. Jared Collins stepped out of the car behind him. He looked older than the photograph, but his eyes were exactly the same. Cold. Measured. Unhurried. He walked toward the house as though he owned it. Rachel had warned me not to confront him early. But sometimes people walk into the room believing their confidence is power. And sometimes the only thing that takes that power away is letting them speak. So I opened the door. Jared stopped on the porch. His face changed when he saw me. Only for a second. Then he smiled. Daniel. Jared. He glanced at Natalie. Then Eric. Then back at me. You weren't supposed to be here. I smiled. I've been hearing that a lot lately. He tried to laugh. It didn't work. You have no idea what's happening. Oh, I think I do. He stepped closer. This is a family matter. No. I held up the death certificate. This is a criminal matter. His face hardened. You don't understand the legal implications. I don't need to. I held up my phone. Rachel does. He went silent. That was the first crack. Not the last. I stepped aside. Come inside. He didn't move. Why? Because you've spent months preparing for a man who isn't dead. I looked directly at him. And tomorrow, you're going to learn what happens when the dead start talking. He left. He didn't threaten me. He didn't shout. He simply got back into the car and drove away. That scared me more than anger would have. The next morning, Rachel filed the first set of actions. We reported the forged death record. We notified the relevant institutions that I was alive. We froze the disputed transactions. We formally challenged the attempted transfer. And then came October 20th. The meeting took place in a conference room downtown. There were attorneys, representatives, Jared, Natalie, Eric, and me. When I walked through the door, the room went silent. Jared looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. Rachel sat beside me. I placed a folder on the table. Good morning. Nobody answered. Jared finally spoke. This is inappropriate. I looked at him. You should have thought about that before killing me on paper. His attorney whispered something to him. He leaned over, then looked at me. This meeting is not what you think it is. I opened the first folder. No. I slid a document across the table. The original property agreement. Jared didn't touch it. You don't have the authority to. I slid another document forward. The forged beneficiary request. Then another. The physician's denial. Another. The access log from your office. Jared stopped talking. Rachel spoke quietly. We also have correspondence showing that the transfer plan was initiated before the date Mr. Mercer's death was recorded. His attorney picked up the documents. His face changed as he read. Jared looked at Natalie. Then Eric. What did you do? Natalie looked at him. Nothing. He turned to Eric. You betrayed me? Eric didn't answer. Jared stood. You don't understand what you've done. I looked at him. No, I stood too. I understand exactly what I've done. He stared at me. You've spent months trying to turn your lies into paperwork. I pointed at the death certificate. You forgot one thing. What? I smiled. You needed me to stay dead. Silence filled the room. Then I did something Jared wasn't expecting. I didn't destroy him. I didn't scream. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't demand money. I simply gave the evidence to the people who were supposed to see it. Everything else happened on its own. The investigation began. The property transfer was stopped. The forged documents were examined. Jared's involvement became impossible to hide, and Natalie and Eric had to answer questions about what they had done. That part mattered to me, because I refused to rescue them from every consequence simply because they were my children. They had participated. They had stayed silent. They had doubted me. They needed to understand what that cost. Months later, the legal case was still unfolding. Jared lost control of the property. The company he had been using was dissolved. The land remained mine, but I didn't sell it. I did something else. I transferred a portion into a protected family trust with strict conditions. Not for Natalie. Not for Eric. For my grandchildren. The money could only be used for education, housing, or medical emergencies. Neither of my children could access it directly. They were furious at first. Then they understood. I wasn't punishing them. I was making sure they could never again be manipulated through money. As for the rest of the property, I donated part of it to a community vocational program. I remembered where I'd started. A young man with dirty work boots, no connections, and a father who told him that a person could always rebuild. I wanted somebody else to get that chance. Eric eventually came to me. It was almost a year after the meeting. We sat on the porch at the lake cabin. The dock was still crooked. The roof was finally repaired. He looked across the water. I don't expect you to forgive me. I said nothing. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I nodded. I believe you. He looked at me. That doesn't mean we're okay. No, it means you're finally telling me the truth. He nodded. That was enough for that day. Natalie came later. She brought the blue coffee mug, the one from the kitchen. She had taken it without asking years earlier because she said she wanted something that reminded her of her mother. I hadn't known. She placed it on the table. I should have told you. Yes. I was scared. I know. I thought protecting the family meant protecting the money. I looked at her. That was the mistake. She started crying. The family wasn't the money. No, she wiped her face. The family was you. I didn't forgive her immediately. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. Sometimes it's a door you open 1 inch at a time. But I let her stay. We talked. Not about the property. Not about Jared. About Elaine. About childhood summers. About the things children remember differently from their parents. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. I don't think perfect reconciliation exists. Some wounds leave scars because scars are how the body remembers what happened. What changed was that I stopped pretending the scar wasn't there. A year later, I received a certified copy of my corrected records. Alive. The official death record had been withdrawn. My name was restored. My status was corrected. I could have framed the document. Instead, I put it in a drawer because I didn't need a certificate to prove I was alive. I already knew. The night I returned to the lake cabin after everything was over, I sat on my father's porch. The same porch where he'd once told me that a man could lose every dollar he owned and still start over. I finally understood the second part of what he'd meant. The most dangerous thing a person can lose isn't money. It's the belief that he has the right to stand up and say no. My children had forgotten that about me. Jared had depended on it. And for a while, I had forgotten it too. I thought being a good father meant keeping everyone comfortable, keeping the peace, protecting people from consequences. I know better now. Sometimes loving your family means drawing a boundary so clearly that nobody can mistake it for anger. Sometimes justice isn't making the people who hurt you suffer. Sometimes it's refusing to let them decide who you become. And sometimes the strongest revenge is simply living long enough to prove the story they told about you was a lie. I still have the death certificate, the false one. It's in the bottom drawer of my desk. I keep it there for one reason, not to remember the people who betrayed me, to remember the day I stopped being afraid of what they might take from me. Because they tried to erase my name. They tried to erase my life. They tried to decide when I was finished. But they made one mistake. They confused my silence with weakness. I was never weak. I was watching. And when the truth finally had somewhere to stand, I let it speak for itself. So if there's something I want you to take from my story, it's this. Never let someone convince you that keeping the peace is more important than keeping your dignity. Family can be complicated. People you love can disappoint you. Trust can be broken. And forgiveness may take longer than anyone expects. But you don't have to become cruel just because someone was cruel to you. You don't have to destroy people to protect yourself. Sometimes all you need is the truth, the courage to face it, and the patience to let consequences find the people who created them. And believe me, when you've spent months being treated like you're already gone, there's something strangely powerful about waking up every morning and remembering one simple fact. You're still here. If someone in your life ever made you feel invisible, unwanted, or powerless, tell me about it in the comments. You never know who might read your words and realize they're not alone. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that protecting your peace does not mean surrendering your dignity. Subscribe to Father's Hidden Reckoning for more stories about family, betrayal, consequences, and the moments when ordinary people finally decide they have had enough. Because sometimes the greatest comeback isn't making your enemies regret what they did. It's becoming someone they can never control again.